Question number 2, this comes from Robert Williams, who says, it seems like the two witnesses in Zechariah 4 and Revelation 11 are like two peoples instead of individuals, as Romans 11:17 through 21 speaks of olive trees, branches being Jews/Gentiles. If so, would the rapture be the calling up of them? Okay, boy, that was a big thing you got there. So if I understand your theory right here, Robert, you're suggesting the rapture is the calling up of two different people groups, and these people groups are Jews and Gentiles, and they're spoken of in Revelation 11 and Zechariah 4 as two witnesses. I think that I guess I would. Here's the thing. I'm going to be super straight with you, Robert. Off of my memory, because I don't have time right now in the Q&A to go and review all of Zechariah 4, all of Revelation 11, and Romans 11, and all this stuff is just a bit much to get into. Turn the answer into like a 30-minute answer. But in Revelation 11, Zechariah 4, in these passages, to my memory, these things are more like, they feel more like individuals. And so if you're going to suggest that these are people groups, and that they're not only people groups, they're two divergent people groups, and specifically one is the Jewish people and one is Gentiles, that's a lot of extra like baggage that's on you to demonstrate your interpretation. And I think one thing can happen to us, and it may or may not be happening to you, Robert, but I like to use these questions as a way of teaching everybody something, right? So this is for everyone. I've had it happen to me many times where I come up with an interpretation that I'm excited about, partly because I think it might be true, and partly because I came up with it. And this is something all Bible teachers and all Christians really have to guard ourselves against, and that is against loving ideas because they're your own. And you get this where, like, as a pastor, you have a message or point you're going to make about a passage, and as you're studying, you read a commentary. And this is how you know that you have this problem, right? As I've had this problem. You're reading a commentary, and the commentary says the same thing as you were going to say. Like, they make the same observation that you were going to make. And you get sad because you're like, boy, I thought that was kind of mine. And this was, especially when I was younger, I felt this way. And now I look at it and I go, oh no, this is confirmation like others. So I would look for others who have made the same observation, generally as a good thing, not as a bad thing. But yeah, let's just look briefly at Revelation 11. And then we'll move on to the next question here. Okay, then I was giving a measuring rod like a staff, and I was told, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there. But do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out, for it is given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. And I will grant authority to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. And if anyone would harm them, fire pours from their mouth and consumes their foes. If anyone would harm them, this is how he is doomed to be killed. They have the power to shut the sky, that no rain may fall during the days of their prophesying, and they have power over the waters to turn them into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they desire. So it's kind of like Moses with the Exodus. They have the power to kind of do these things that Moses was doing during that time to show God's judgment over Egypt. But this is happening centered out of Jerusalem. And when they have finished their testimony, the beast that rises from the bottomless pit will make war on them and conquer them and kill them. And their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city that symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. For 3.5 days, some from the peoples and tribes and languages and nations will gaze at their dead bodies and refuse to let them be placed in a tomb. We're right here. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and make merry and exchange presents, because these two prophets have been a torment to those who dwell on the earth. Notice that the language is still two individuals. Like all throughout the passage, it feels like two individuals. So far, there could be a shift if there was meant to be an image of a larger group, but I haven't seen that yet. Okay, but after 3.5 days, a breath of life from God will entered them, and they stood up on their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. So they have like a resurrection. Then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, come up here. And this is where you feel like you get that rapture connection. And they went up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies watched them. And at that hour, there was a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city fell. And this is kind of the end of this section. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the rest were terrified and gave glory to the God of heaven. Okay, there's in the passage, every time that these two witnesses are mentioned, it feels like two individuals. They're even called two prophets. And I don't know if there's a time where a group of people in Scripture is called a prophet individually. I don't know that that happens, so I'm going to count that as a strike against the idea. But one of the things that you saw is these olive these olive trees, and you connected this to Romans 11. So here I think we can sometimes overlap biblical passages that maybe aren't intended to be overlapped. So my opinion, and Robert, I could be wrong, but here's my thoughts. The way to show that the overlap doesn't belong is to demonstrate that there's a disconnect, that these ideas, these visuals are being used in different ways in these different passages. A way to show that your overlap, Revelation 11 and Romans 11 is correct, is to show that there's a connect between those two passages. Okay, that's the basic idea. I'm going to make the case for the disconnect here. These are the two olive trees. Well, in Romans 11, there is one olive tree. There's one tree. And we're grafted into the tree. And so if Romans 11's theology is important to us, right, that Jews and Gentiles are grafted into one, then it would be very strange here in Revelation to see them now separated into two olive trees. So that the visual doesn't work. It's mixed metaphors. These are different things. These are two olive trees, and they're also what? Two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. Okay, so they represent the church in a sense. So there's a representation there. This is the only verse that could be seen as potentially making them a group of people, but I think the whole rest of the context pushes that they're two individuals. So to summarize, Revelation 11 really seems to push that they're just two individuals. That seems to be very clear in the fact that they're like Moses. They're calling things out. Their dead bodies lie in the streets. How could they be in one city? You'd have all the Christians, Jews and Gentiles, all together. Like, you see how the visual doesn't work with a group, but it works with individuals. Two people in the street works, but millions and millions, that would be a challenge. And the overlap with Romans seems to be a disconnect because we have two olive trees breaking the image of our unity in Christ if we try to make them the same. Those are my thoughts on that, Robert.